Thanks for watching Open House. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you here again tomorrow.
From the world leader in business news, this is The Closing Bell. Live at CNBC's global headquarters, Maria Bartiromo.
Meanwhile, for most Americans, today is Groundhog's Day. For Wall Street, it is Greenspan Day. He and the rest of the Federal Reserve policymakers today decided to raise the short-term federal funds rate by another quarter of a point, that to 2.5%, the latest in a series of increases, which, of course, began last June. We have two reports on today's decision on interest rates. Our Hampton Pearson is on the Fed's decision. Then Sharon Epperson on how the move will affect all of us. Hampton, begin us off.
Hi, Maria. Well, first of all, the Fed, in a way, kind of did its own version of Groundhog Day, the movie, not even interested in recasting its version of Every Day is the Same, namely its accommodative policy of measured rate hikes. Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan and his fellow FOMC policymakers did, as expected, raise key short-term interest rates a quarter point to 2.5%, handicapping the economy. The language, with the exception of one word, was identical with its December 14th statement. Inflation and inflation expectations are well contained. The labor market is improving gradually. And for now, there's no reason to change its policy of measured rate hikes. No surprise for financial markets, and therefore little reaction to today's decision.
Oh, I don't think you do much with this one. I wouldn't expect the market to move much. The market will wait for Friday's employment report and go from there. If the economy continues to grow at a 3% plus or minus pace, then the Fed is going to ratchet up to, what I believe is a 3% rate.
But former Fed Governor Lyle Gramley believes inflation concerns and a possible slowdown in economic growth could make the Fed's job much tougher in the coming months.
This is a year in which the decisions facing the Fed are going to be much more difficult than they have been in the past 6 to 9 months. When the funds rate was at 1%, moving it up to where it is now was like falling off a log. There are going to have to be some careful trade-offs considered as the Fed moves forward.
And in addition to analyzing more economic data, like this Friday's jobs report, most Fed watchers say the first real sign of how the Fed views the economy will happen on February 16th, when Chairman Alan Greenspan appears on Capitol Hill. Maria?
Hampton, thank you. Now let's take a look at the impact of today's decision on Main Street. We bring in CNBC's personal finance correspondent, Sharon Epperson. Sharon.
Thank you, Maria. Well, the series of rate hikes that the Fed has imposed since June haven't packed too hard a blow on consumers. Counting today's rate hike, the Fed funds rate has increased 1.5 percentage points in that time, while the average rate on a 2-year personal loan, for example, has increased only about 0.04 percentage points. Still, while the Fed's moves have been gradual, this result, when all is said and done, could be significant for some consumers.
We see it as a great way to borrow money at a very cheap price.
For Pat Hayes, taking out a home equity line of credit last year seemed an inexpensive way to pay down the mortgage on a vacation home.
I could utilize that money and kind of get rid of the debt that I owed.
But the bite of rising interest rates may eventually become too much for some borrowers to bear.
The average rate on a home equity line of credit is 5.7%, and it's variable. So a year from now, that home equity line of credit could have a rate of 7.5%, maybe more, depending on how aggressive the Fed is.
Say your current interest-only payment on a $100,000 home equity line at 5.7% is $475 a month. If the rate spikes to 7% by next year, your monthly payment will have increased to $583, an extra $108 a month. So mortgage broker Bob Moulton advises,
pay off extra while the rates are low, because when the rates do go higher, 7, maybe even 8%, you won't have as much of a balance, and the lower balance will offset the higher interest rates.
Just as variable rate home equity lines now make up about 80% of the home equity market, about a third of all mortgages are adjustable rate mortgages, many of them hybrid ARMs. And homeowners with these loans whose fixed period is up or whose rate may soon adjust could also feel the pinch.
When you start increasing the amount of that payment by $100 or $200 a month each year when that rate comes time to adjust, that's a pretty significant impact to household budgets.
Consumers who've racked up credit card debt are already in financial hot water, but could potentially get scalded by rising rates. After all, the average rate on a platinum variable rate card has increased from 10.7% to over 12% since last June. And even fixed rate credit cards are no haven from higher rates, since issuers can switch from a fixed to a variable rate card with little warning. Now, if you're trying to decide whether or not to refinance if you've taken out an adjustable rate mortgage, here's some things to think about. How long do you plan to stay in the home? If it's longer than a fixed period of the loan, you probably are fine. If your rate will adjust in the next year or so, though, you probably want to refinance because rates will likely be